Back in the 1800s, textile workers in England felt threatened by new machinery. Would they lose their livelihood to inanimate objects? They weren't going to wait to find out. They smashed the offending technology in organized raids. This ornery group became known as Luddites. Today, if you resist technology, you might be called a Luddite. Our hosts, Colleen Burke and Melissa Burks, don't resist technology, but they may be a little slow on the uptake. Another thing they have in common? Both are north of 50 years old. This begs the question, as you age, are you destined to become a Luddite? Can you belong to AARP and have the latest PC? Let's find out. Welcome to Luddites Unite.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Luddites Unite. I'm Colleen Burke,
I'm
here
Melissa.
with my co-host Melissa, and today we are thrilled to welcome Cory Doctorow to our podcast. Cory is a science fiction author, activist, and journalist. His newest novel, Picks and Shovels, returns to the world of Red Team Blues to give readers the origin story of Martin Hench, the tech scam-busting forensic accountant. He grabbed our attention because of an article he wrote called Science Fiction is a Luddite Literature. In 2020, Cory was inducted into the Canadian Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame. So, Cory, let's start with this. Many people believe the term Luddite refers to the textile workers who smashed automated machinery being introduced into mills because they feared technology. Sidebar, 20 minutes ago, that's what my husband told my son a Luddite was when I told him we were doing this broadcast, and I said no.
You said no?
So I said no.
Colleen, you named this podcast.
I did. Cory, you say the story of the original Luddites is more complex than that. So can you expand on what you mean? Because I want to be able to eloquently tell people in my home just how wrong that was.
Well, sure. I would start by saying that the way that we think about the word Luddite today is really a testament to the idea that history is written by the winners. Because at the time, people got very angry about Luddites. Luddites had lots of enemies, but none of them said that the thing that was animating Luddites was a fear of technology. So to give you a little background here, you have the Industrial Revolution. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, the most skilled technical people in the world were weavers. So the most advanced technology we had was weaving technology. And to learn to be a skilled weaver, you took 7 years of apprenticeship. So this is like getting a master's at MIT.
Wow. Yeah.
And so nobody was afraid of technology in the textile working industry. They were very, very skilled technologists.
Sure.
So their bosses come along and they want to take an industry that is dominated by a skilled trade where the scarcity of that trade has allowed them to form guilds that exert pressure on their employers and also have had laws passed that give the guild what we today call co-determination. So the idea that if a new way of making fabric comes along, making textiles comes along, that the guilds and the inventors and purchasers of those machines would collectively bargain for how those machines would be introduced and under what circumstances and who would use them and so on. The guilds were interested in a lot of things. One was obviously their jobs and their way of life. And, if you were a weaver, you worked from not from a centralized factory, but from home. And so you were your own boss, right?
Oh, that's
you had an
know.
enormous amount of autonomy. Okay. But also, they were really concerned with the product. These people were skilled tradespeople, not just interested in labor conditions. They were interested in the quality of the material.
Sure.
This was the thing that they were best in the world at doing. And people really cared about the quality of the textiles they got, partly because they were so expensive. And the people who bought the machines, the new machines, the new automated frames and so on, they were on the one hand turning out a product that was significantly worse than the product that the weavers had made, and that was one thing that offended them. But the other thing is that the machines were marketed and purchased on the grounds that they were so easy a child could use them. And the reason that was important is because they wanted children to work in the factories.
Yeah. Oh.
The orphanages of London were overflowing with Napoleonic War orphans. And these people who were buying the machines reckoned that they could indenture Napoleonic War orphans from London to come north to Manchester and Birmingham. And they would indenture them for a period of 10 years. And these were small children, and they would be beaten and starved and maimed, and they died at enormous rates. And then they would eventually be discharged and allowed to go their own way. And one of them, a guy named Robert Blincoe, wrote a best-selling memoir about his time in the mills that was so successful and so inspirational that it prompted Charles Dickens to write Oliver Twist.
No way.
Oliver Twist is Luddite fanfic. And
Fantastic.
what the Luddites wanted from, I guess we would call, they call them entrepreneurs, we might call them capitalists, the factory owners.
Sure.
What
Factory
they wanted
owners.
from them.
Who are the winners in this scenario?
From the winners, yeah.
The
What they
winners.
wanted from them and what they wanted from Parliament was some adherence to the rule of law. They wanted that co-determination, which would allow them to say things like, you can't indenture children to run these machines. The factories have to be safe. You can't turn out low-quality product that steals from the public with fabric that doesn't wear well. They wanted a bunch of things that are, I think, each demand individually, most people say was quite reasonable. And taken as a whole, though, represented an enormous challenge to this idea. And so Parliament, adhering to that age-old adage, money talks and bullshit walks, threw away the law. And they said, kidnap as many orphans as you need to, go ahead and run your dark satanic mills. And that's when you get the Luddite uprisings. So the Luddites, Luddite refers to a mythological character called either General Ludd or King Ludd. It's kind of a Robin Hood figure, except maybe Robin Hood was real, and there's no indication, as far as I know, that Ned Ludd ever lived. And in some tellings, he's a giant, and he is certainly a fearsome figure. And he was a folk figure before the Luddites came along. They didn't invent him; they co-opted him, and they would write letters on behalf of Ned Ludd to the factory owners, saying, "If you don't cut this out, if you don't adhere to the law, we're going to come and break your frames. We're going to break your machines.
Okay.
Or we'll burn down your factory, or we'll, kill you and your family in your sleep." Various versions of this. If you can imagine the spectrum of responses to Tesla dealerships today, this is basically that plus a little bit of fantasy ogre characters. Like imagine if Tesla was opposed not just by mobs of right-thinking people, but also theoretically a giant. That's the Luddites, right? And Elon Musk is getting emails saying the giant is coming for you.
Coming for you.
Giant. And Parliament was divided on this question. Lord Byron, his maiden speech in the House of Lords was in defense of the Luddites. Mary Shelley was directly inspired by the Luddites when she wrote Frankenstein.
Wow.
Frankenstein is in part a parable about machines gone wild.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fecklessness of the entrepreneur class who build the machines and foist them on society.
Yeah.
So they enjoyed an enormous amount of popular support, but their opposition was fearsome. Parliament eventually passed laws that made it a hanging offense to take an oath. Right. So to join the Luddites, so oath taking became a hanging offense, and they had mass hangings, not just of textile workers, but of their wives and children.
Oh, good Lord.
They recalled soldiers from the front of the Napoleonic War. So again, we're getting to Tesla stuff here, right?
Yeah,
They recalled soldiers
parallels
from the front to defend the mills and round up the leaders of the Luddite movement. And they crushed the Luddites. And then they salted the earth, right? They made the name Luddite synonymous not with labor organizer or someone interested in the social arrangements surrounding technology, but instead of a kind of like a caveman.
Yes.
Exactly.
You know,
That's exactly right. Yeah.
recoils from technology in terror, not understanding it. And I think, you know, I'll lay my cards on the table here. I'm on the side of the Luddites, but I think even if you weren't on the side of the Luddites, there's no like rational, informed position that says that the Luddites were animated by fear of technology.
Sure. Well, where did that come from? Is it, you're saying it was the story that the wealthy, the owners of the
Yeah.
mills or what have you, that was their way of
It was a
pretty
smear.
much just summing it up.
Yeah, it was a smear. It was like saying, you know, the reason people don't want to defund Social Security is because they love welfare fraud, right? Or the reason people want Medicare for all is because they're communists, right? Like it's just a smear.
Right. So going back, is there anything you think that the mill owners or what have you could have done differently to have this transition go well?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the weaving machinery that was being used at the time of the stocking frame and the steam loom and so on, it wasn't like the first generation of that technology. There had been previous iterations of it that had gone without these kinds of violent uprisings.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think AI can do your job, but I think an AI salesman can sell your boss a chatbot and convince him that it can do your job even though it can't. And like the AI, the steam loom couldn't do the weaver's job, but the steam loom salesman could sell the factory owner a machine and convince him it could do the job. And then, just like every time you tap your phone, if you're not watching where you put your finger, they've sneakily put an AI button underneath it. And surprise, you're using AI. In the same way, anytime you went into the store, you would be getting the equivalent of AI slop, which was this badly woven garbage textile.
Sure.
That came from these new machines. And so, you know, they could have done co-determination. They could have allowed these skilled workers to make incremental improvements to the machine to improve their quality, to evaluate the machines before they were purchased, to, you know, uphold the law that already existed about having payments to skilled workers if they were being phased out, lots of things.
So I'm fixated on the term Luddite and how it's now redefined, for me at least. It's, to me, it's a pejorative. It's said in a pejorative way these days. Should I, if someone calls me a Luddite, and the definition of it is what you're telling us, how should I feel about myself? Am I to be flattered, embarrassed, angry, if it was used correctly?
Well, look, you know, reclaiming pejoratives is a complicated business.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have plenty of queer friends who are very happy to be called queer. And I have at least one person who emails me every time I use that word in print and tells me that I'm a homophobe for using it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
It is what it is.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Wow. Okay.
You know, and many people have tried to reclaim slurs, and some of them have been successful and some less successful. And sometimes wordplay can be a way to get people to challenge their notions or to open a conversation. So we think about things like the pro-choice movement, right, which then frames the opposition as the anti-choice movement, which you know, you can see why that's a thing that you know, you'd want to be on the side of pro-choice and not anti-choice, and likewise pro-life and anti-life, right? So people are always trying to figure out what to call one another. So there's a movement to make software in ways that respects your liberty and your dignity. And the original name for this movement is the free software movement. And that term was coined by a guy called Richard Stallman, who won MacArthur Prize for his work on this. And he says that he called it free software because the ambiguity between free as in freedom and free as in free of charge, or as they say, free as in beer and free as in speech, would open up many opportunities for conversations in which people who were confused and said, well, what do you mean the software doesn't cost anything? Would then have a chance to discuss with you, no, this is the idea that software should respect your freedom. And in practice, that didn't happen.
So he wanted that ambiguity. He wanted the ambiguity. Because, of course, that was the first thing I thought of. I mean, I think probably most people, oh, it's free. Neat.
And in practice, that's what most people thought. And especially people in industry were scared off by it.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
And so eventually, some other people came up with another term for it that you've probably heard, which is open source.
Open source. Okay.
Yeah.
Open source is what we call free software. And at first, open source and free software were the same thing, just two names for the same thing.
Okay.
But technology is a fast-moving realm. And so a set of strictures or license terms or norms about freedom that don't change in response to changes in how the technology works can cease to protect your freedom as the technology changes. So, for example, if you have a rule that says if you distribute software, you have to distribute the code so that people can modify it so that it suits their needs. That works great until most software is in the cloud and you're no longer distributing software. You're just letting people log into it. And so what happened was, over the 20 years that followed the split between free software and open source, there were a series of critical junctures in which the technology changed, and what we counted as in or out of that movement was called into question. And where we asked this question, is the source open, we included a lot of stuff in that we wouldn't have included if our question was, does this enhance human freedom? We took this thing that was about an ethical proposition, right, freedom, and we turned it into an instrumental proposition, which is transparency. Can you see the code?
Can you see?
So, you know, transparency has lots of benefits. You can know what it's doing, you can improve it, and so on. But transparency is not the same as freedom. Transparency is a pretty good prerequisite for freedom. But, like, if there's really good FOIA, Freedom of Information access, and so you can find out exactly how many people the cops beat up, but the cops still get to beat them up. You can have a great deal of transparency and no freedom at all, right? And so, you know, when we talk about difficult words that have ambiguous meanings, I think that the evidence from the free software open source case, which is admittedly a sample size of one, that the evidence from that is that we know that people are not going to, by and large, be intrigued by ambiguity and want to find out more. They're more likely to just sort of very quickly make an unfavorable impression and move on. But on the other hand, if you abandon the complex or nuanced aspects of your language in order to make the point easier to grasp, you might find yourself some decades later in a position where the thing that you care about has gone away and all you've got is the thing that matches whatever words you chose.
Okay. So we've decided to end our podcast here with what's a round robin that we labored over the name and decided to call it Just the Facts, FAX.
Oh, you don't want to call it like the shuttle loom?
I don't know.
It goes in and out of it's the thing that goes, or the loom shuttle, it goes in and out of the cross threads.
Shuttle.
I'm just spitballing here, but workshop it a little.
We needed you about 45 minutes ago
right.
when we were laboring over this.
Do you call it the shuttle loom or the loom shuttle?
I think it's called the loom shuttle. So the loom is the machine and the shuttle is the part that goes through the cross threads. It's thematically consistent. All
right. Okay, so Cory, you've traveled back to England, 1812, and you meet a Luddite at the textile mill. We want you to complete this sentence. Luddite, I am from the future, and I am here to tell you.
I guess I would say, buddy, it's a long shot, but the soldiers they're going to bring home from the front to kill you are ultimately your class allies, because they are also getting the shitty end of the stick from this deal. And you need to figure out how to make common cause with them. And maybe your path to that is highlighting the plight of the Napoleonic War orphans and say that could be your kid inside the factory. But you've got to figure out how to make common cause with them.
Okay, so now what's one piece of technology these days that you cannot live without?
Sanitation?
That's technology?
Oh, yeah.
I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Boy, I was thinking like an iPhone, and here, you got. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any kind of technology that you just don't get the hype about?
Oh, AI. AI is boring and stupid.
Really?
Yeah. I have a rule at my Q&As that you're not allowed to ask questions about AI.
Okay.
And the first person who mentions it owes everyone else a drink.
We did not.
Last question. So if Martin Hench were in a movie, who would play him?
You know, like if it could be anyone from history, like Steve
Sure.
McQueen, circa Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cory, I'm going to put an image of his newest book. He's an extremely prolific writer. And so do you want to make a plug for the picture?
Sure. Yeah, so I write when I'm anxious. That's why I'm a prolific writer, because we live in anxious times. And during lockdown, I wrote 9 books. And when you write 9 books in a short period of time, you get a little weird. And so I wrote this book called Red Team Blues, and the premise was that it was going to be the last volume in a long-running detective series about this guy, Martin Hench, this forensic accountant who has been unwinding tech scams in Silicon Valley for 40 years, and now he's got one last job. And I thought writing the last volume without writing the other volumes would be a fun gag. Like, it'd be fun to read the last volume in a series that doesn't exist. And it was so successful that the next morning, after I sent the manuscript to my editor, I had an email back from him with just 3 lines that said, "That was a fucking ride. Whoa." And he bought 3 of them. And then I had to figure out what to do because I didn't want to bring Hench out of retirement, right? This is not Sherlock Holmes coming back after Rickenbach Falls, you know. And so this book, Picks and Shovels, is the 3rd one, and it's the first one chronologically. It's Marty Hench's origin story. You can read them in any order. And this is set in the 1980s, in the heroic era of the weird PC, when no one knew what computers were for, or who was supposed to use them, or what they were supposed to look like, or who was supposed to sell them. And it's about a weird PC company called Fidelity Computer, run by a Mormon bishop, an Orthodox priest, and or rather an Orthodox rabbi and a Catholic priest. And the joke is that it's a pyramid scheme. And they are recruiting parishioners to sell these computers, and the computers are designed to just continually extract money from you after you buy them so that you can't get your data off of them. They require you use special floppy disks, special paper for the printer, and so on. Only their software. And Marty Hench ends up working for their competitors, a company founded by 3 women who ran the sales organization and quit in disgust. One's a nun who left her order and became involved with liberation theology. One's a Mormon woman who's left the faith over its opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. And one is an Orthodox woman whose family's kicked her out because she's queer. And they're making the tools to unlock these PCs, the things that let you get your data off or use anyone's floppies or anyone's drives or anyone's paper in the printer. And it turns out that the kind of guys that are willing to make millions of dollars betraying the people who look up to them as faith leaders are not above spectacular acts of lethal violence to defend that scam. And what starts as a commercial dispute becomes a shooting war, and the stakes get really, really high.
So Martin's, again, his origin story. So he's in his 20s or something. The character.
Yeah, he's a 17-year-old at MIT who flunks out of a computer science program because he's too busy programming computers to get his computer science work done.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Well, Cory, thank you so much for your time. I think you took a little longer than we anticipated, but very fun conversation. Certainly opened my eyes a lot.
Well, thank
you. And I will be proudly calling myself a Luddite from here on.
By all means.
All right.
Luddites Unite.
Have a great night. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Next time.
That's today's episode. Thanks for joining the conversation, and we welcome your feedback. If you're a loyal Luddite, feel free to send thoughts via carrier pigeon or smoke signal. If you've gone to the other side, email Melissa Burks at melissaannburks@yahoo.com. That's MELISSAANNBIRKS @yahoo.com. See you soon.